All right, what's going on, boys and girls? We're here with a reaction video, and this one is about why someone didn't switch to Linux. And I'm curious. I wonder what if it's going to be full of dumb, like a lot of these other videos I've reacted to that are not necessarily that. So I'm hoping that homie here is actually a solid reason I actually did try, because I get tired of people who don't and they talk out of their ass. So let's roll into see what homeboy here has to say. And this is Jeff. This is Jeff's Tech.
Today, I'll be sharing my experience in an attempt to fully transition from Windows 10 to Linux. So quite a while ago, I made a video discussing why Windows 10 was an OS I wanted to get away from. It's been quite some time now, so let's discuss my experience, what I ended up with, and what you should know if you're considering switching. First, let's begin and talk about setup. It was easy. I downloaded the latest Manjaro KDE ISO, burned it to a USB, booted it up, installed it alongside Windows 10, and I'm basically done. After customizing everything to feel more familiar, I wanted to tackle gaming. Now, I spent a bunch of time trying to get Steam to work like I was on Windows. Ideally, I'd want to have a secondary drive as a Steam library, and of course the OS drive. The thing with Linux that you have to keep in mind is that if you really want to do some tweaking, it's going to be in the command line. Even when I tried doing everything right, I would usually end up with a bricked install. After a bunch of messing around, I eventually got some game.
I'm not going to poo-poo all over you. The statement I don't agree with. No, you do not have to do all that from the command line. You don't have to make a directory for your Steam library on a secondary drive. I know this because I have a secondary drive in this particular laptop that I use, and I didn't have to do any of that. In Dolphin, so there's two different things. First, make sure if you're going to use the terminal, FS tab will tell you what drives are mounted and all that stuff. In Dolphin, it should show drives that aren't even mounted. All you have to do is click on them and it'll mount it. Or if you can't auto mount a drive, just type in auto mount and it should be able to, the next time you boot up your system, mount the drive for you. I know that because I do that with this particular system. Once that drive's mounted, ext, ntsf, whatever, doesn't matter. It's not going to care. What you're going to want to do is either format the drive to whatever one you're going to use, right click, tell it to create a folder, Steam library or whatever, and just point in Steam to that directory in the Steam file browser when you go to add a downloads folder. The difference is going to be in the file hierarchy, which is different than Windows. I believe it's going to be either media, it's under your home directory, under run, under media, and then it'll be the drive, and in there should be your Steam folder. That is where you're going to want to put all your games. Again, I do that. That's how I do Steam on my particular machine. So, and as far as some games working, some not, that'll fix the drive issue potentially. Second thing is some games work, some don't. That is down to a Proton /Wine /compatibility layer, whatever you want to call it. Some games don't know how to interpret the compatibility layer with Proton. So one game that I like to play is called Bayonetta. The PC version has a hard time, sometimes it's the machine, that if it's on an external drive or a different drive other than the main OS drive, it doesn't know how to make the call between the two drives. So, and especially if you're running an NTSF drive and you're running an ETX4 or whatever on your Linux OS drive. So Wine doesn't know how to interpret like what would be like the C or D drive over to Linux sometimes. What you have to do there is you actually have to drag and drop the entire file for the game into another Steam, create another Steam library on your desktop or your primary OS drive, and drag and drop it over to there. Usually that solves the problem, because usually what would happen is a window would open up and a window would close. Or you click the play button, it does the little Steam logo, making it look like it's going to play, and gives you the blue, running icon, and then hey, look, nothing happens. And then it goes back to hit the giant play button again. That's usually what happens there. There's also the easy anti-cheat issue, which that's a whole separate issue. That's a third-party problem that, unfortunately, as much as we've tried fixing it in the community, it's not always fixable, and that takes weird resources and money that a lot of us don't have, unless you're, Valve. So just a few kind of caveats with the some work, some don't. I'm just going to give the reasons why some do and some don't.
To run, but I had to mount my Steam drive manually, and it really didn't want to work. I did some experimenting by creating an ext4 partition and seeing if Sonic Mania would run with mods with Wine, but in the end, I just gave up on games. I had to recreate my Steam library, but I got over it. I see a lot of videos that go over Linux gaming, but I wish that there was a more in-depth explanation of using secondary drives. I did find out what it was I needed to do, but in the end, it just didn't work out in a practical sense. I'm sure someone with more skill could have made this work better, but this I got over as I don't play a lot of Steam games nowadays. When you get games running though, Linux usually does a great job of doing so, in some cases better than Windows. Not always though, and unfortunately, anti-cheat games won't run at all. Depending on what games you play, Linux could be a viable option, but it also for some just wouldn't work. Now, when it comes to productivity, I feel this was one of the higher points. I went with Manjaro KDE Plasma as customization options are great and it has a lot of stuff baked in that I would have had to manually install on most other distros. The great thing about Linux is the overhead. Unlike Windows 10, which has a multitude of background processes hogging memory, Linux is a clean, bloat-free platform. Windows 10, even on high-end hardware, will still sometimes feel a tad sluggish here and there. Not necessarily slow, but loading up the file explorer on Windows, for example, versus Linux is pretty comparable. I had some grief trying to get it working, but I did eventually get DaVinci Resolve to open and run on Manjaro. I was mostly lost because I was transitioning from HitFilm Express to Resolve at the time, but for the record, Resolve seemed to function perfectly. I didn't do extensive testing, but again, this was quite a while ago, but if I were to get Resolve running on Manjaro again, I would probably have no issues creating and rendering a video. By now though, I've cleaned my Windows bootloader and went back to Windows 10. The deal with my system is that it decides when it doesn't want to be stable. UEFI doesn't play well at all of my motherboard in Windows 10, it would most certainly blue screen. Legacy works more or less, but again, it's a weird situation. I could be using my PC perfectly.
So as far as the Windows blue screening, that does sound like a hardware issue specifically. Best version, check your SODIMMs, check your GPUs, check your power supplies, check your thermals, unplug all your extra USB stuff and plug one in at a time, the typical problem solving kind of thing as far as Windows is concerned. So that one I can't really help you with. As far as DaVinci Resolve and kind of being a pain, if you're using Manjaro, I believe it should be in the AUR anyway, so it shouldn't really be that hard to actually install. Using it, however, if I'm going by what I saw in the description of your title, in your video title, that you're using a RX 580, I believe DaVinci Resolve is going to recommend that you use the Pro drivers. Now, if you have the Pro drivers installed, that could cause some issues with your gaming. Just going to throw that out there. The Pro drivers you don't use generically when it comes to Linux. There is ways to use most of the features and functions that you're going to find in the quote-unquote Pro drivers from AMD are actually just already baked into Linux itself and Mesa and all that stuff and the kernel. So you actually, when it comes to, if you're just gaming, I would recommend just using the built-in stuff. You as long as you got the newest kernels and the newest Mesas, so you're going to get the performance increases and the driver fixes and all that kind of stuff right there anyway. As far as the Pro stuff, I don't know what to tell you on that one. I don't use Resolve personally, but if you're going to use Resolve, understand the caveat that the Pro drivers are usually recommended by most people because it has the OpenCL and a lot of the other stuff that Resolve ties into. So
fine, and maybe I want to check an Amazon order. It can sometimes work great, and other times it will cause the Windows Explorer to continuously restart. By now, I believe these random issues are potentially due to a faulty DIMM slot, or maybe due to my questionable graphics card. So at this point, you might be thinking that Linux isn't a great option to switch to. For me, it really didn't work out too well, but for others, I'd say that there's some hope. Gaming, while compatibility and performance has improved substantially with Proton, it's also arguable that due to anti-cheat that won't work on Linux, gaming might still seem like a low point. A lot of Steam games run great, but even after you figure out your library setup with drives, you may be disappointed that some games just aren't compatible. And in the case of usability and productivity, doing regular computer things was fine, and again, Resolve seemed perfectly stable while I was on Manjaro. So that's a totally legit way for me to edit videos. So, I guess to conclude, Windows 10, whether you like it or not, is flat out the best for gaming. Linux does have a wide selection of games, and Proton has enabled the ability to play a bunch of Steam's games with similar to if not better performance than Windows. But the reality is, Windows is the only way to play Windows Store games and games with anti-cheat.
So I'm just gonna ask one question: who actually uses the Windows Store? Just saying. As far as the easy anti-cheat and battle eye and all that stuff, you are correct there. I can't disregard that. You know, every time we get a workaround going or something getting fixed, Epic or Battle Eye update stuff and break shit some more. So, you know, you're not wrong. And like I said, I totally get where you're coming from. So for me, it's your point's valid. It's not wrong. I do question the Windows Store game thing. I don't know who actually uses the Windows Store, but hey, if you do, more power to you. Anyway.
And even with some of the anti-cheat bypasses currently available, these games won't really be playable. But even though Linux can't replace Windows for me, I'm sure it could for some of you guys. Again, there's a bunch of games that are supported now, and even if some games don't run well or don't run at all, thanks to the awesome community, there's usually fixes that can help you get up and running. And when it comes to productivity, I'd have to get more comfortable with the file structure and navigation, but if Resolve is as stable as it appeared to be, I could definitely see myself making videos on Linux. Maybe I will sometime. To conclude, gaming on Linux has gotten a whole lot better and continues to improve thanks to the awesome developers and community. With a long list of compatible games, which you can find in the video description, gaming on Linux can be a viable option for some people, but not all. And with gaming aside, Linux is a great OS for productivity, and if there's a Windows-specific app you use, you could probably find an alternative or get it running in Wine. If you've got some spare time on your hands, it only takes a USB drive and an ISO. You don't have to install anything. If you don't like it, try another distro, but if you do, installation is simple. Anyways guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions or suggestions, please let me know in the comment section, and I'll do my best to get back to you. If you did enjoy the video, hit that like button, but if not, you know where to go. While you're there, consider subscribing to the channel and enable notifications for more quality tech videos. Anyways, thanks for watching and I'll see you later.
So I really don't have much to kind of crap on here as far as his approach. He's just saying it doesn't work for him, and that's okay. I'm all about people using what works for them. If Linux doesn't work for you, then by all means, homemade, use what does. If Windows works better for you, awesome. It's not my place to tell you what tech works better. What I will tell you is some of the problems you ran into are not necessarily OS specific, but they're more nuanced and more getting used to how that particular system operates, like the file hierarchy and how permissions work and all the other stuff, the auto mounting and that kind of stuff. That's probably the biggest thing. As far as like any points you've made, I got nothing to complain about. I would say give it another chance. Look at what you need and what you're looking for in a system. If I have found the best results with Linux is when the machine has a singular purpose and all the ancillary stuff is the best thing. Example, machine behind me is a NVIDIA K3100M. It's a quadra card. Great for OBS stuff. gaming is ancillary to that. And so it's like, oh, cool, I can run games, but it's not a gaming machine. So just kind of how you view this is Linux is more of a primary purpose. Like this is its function, this is its form kind of deal. Any extra stuff that it does, totally awesome, but it's not its primary function. So I would recommend finding its function, and then any extra stuff that it can do is awesome. But again, different approach, different people. So give it a try again. Hopefully there was some helpful information in here, whatever. So keep trucking, keep trying. I'll catch you guys on the flip side. Peace.